Having a clenched fist is a common side effect after stroke, and it's often due to spasticity or shortening of muscles and tendons. And spasticity occurs in around 25 to 39% of stroke survivors. So if you're experiencing that tight closed hand, know that you're not alone. So today I'm going to walk you through a progressive set of techniques that you can use to improve it. Hand splints are one of the first lines of defense when it comes to both preventing and managing a clenched fist. If you notice that your hand is getting tighter and weaker and a little more difficult to open, you can try something called a resting hand splint, and I will leave a link to one down in the description below. But a resting hand splint will help to keep your fingers and your hand in a better, more open position so that we can try to reduce the amount of shortening of any muscles or tendons in the hand and fingers. Now, typically, my general recommendation is to wear a hand splint during the night while you're sleeping and take it off during the daytime so you can try to move that hand and those fingers. Make sure that if you're starting to wear a new splint or brace, that you are checking your skin for any signs of irritation or breakdown. You just want to make sure that you're being safe while you're starting something new. Positioning is the next step, and it can also be used in conjunction with any of the other techniques that I'm going to talk about today. Positioning is really important because we're trying to get our joints in an optimal position to reduce that muscle shortening and reduce the effects of spasticity. What I often see with stroke survivors is a tendency, because of that spasticity, to have the arm really pulled in at the side, the forearm comes up and the wrist is usually bent and the fingers are closed in a fist. So we want to try to counteract what the body and the brain are trying to do with movements that are opposite of that to try to reduce the effects of spasticity. And this comes kind of in two steps. One is to first try to get the arm away from your trunk, and you can do this positioning two ways. You can take a pillow if you need a little extra help to try to get that out, to get that arm out from the side, or you can gently stretch and place your arm out to the side and see if it will stay there of its own accord, if you can control that. The second piece to positioning to make sure that we're opening up that clenched fist is to get the arm in another position where we're turning the forearm down so that the palm is facing down, and then doing some stretching to try to get the fingers opened and trying to get the thumb out to the side. Now, you may not have a completely flat hand, and that's okay. You just want to try to get those fingers and that thumb opened up as much as you can. Now, if you're able to keep them out on whatever surface you have next to you, whether that's a couch arm or what have you, that's great. You can also take a pillow and put that under your arm as well, if that's going to be more helpful to keep your hand open. The next step is to talk to your doctor about potentially getting Botox injections. And this is important because we know that the clenched fist, the tight fist, is usually caused by spasticity. And at the end of the day, spasticity is this overactive reflex that is triggered, and it's causing those muscles to contract abnormally. If you want to know more about it, I made a video about spasticity that you can go check out. But what Botox does is, when it's injected, it blocks the chemical signals between the nerves and the muscles to stop that overactive muscle contraction and tightening. Now, Botox isn't a long-term fix, but it can have effects up to 3 or 4 months, which is really important because in that time that you're not having those really overactive muscle contractions and tightness, you can start working on some movement and stretching. And that brings me to my next step in our progression, which is stretching. Stretching is one of the best tools that we've got in our toolbox to deal with a clenched fist and spasticity on a long-term basis. Because we know that spasticity is usually behind a clenched or tight fist, we need to do slow stretching. So that means that we're going slowly with our movements. We're not jerking our body parts back, but we're moving very slowly and we're not pushing through pain. We also want to make sure that we're stretching in the direction opposite of what typically constitutes a clenched fist. So for example, we might see a bent wrist, closed thumb, closed fingers with somebody who's got a clenched fist. So when you're stretching, you want to make sure that you're pushing back against those movements, the opposite of that. So the opposite of wrist flexion is wrist extension, or bringing it back. And you're doing that in a nice slow manner where you're just gently pushing that wrist back. You're not fighting to push through that high muscle tone, that spasticity. You're gently, slowly stretching, maybe holding for 10 to 15 seconds. Then you would move to thumb. And so maybe you're getting underneath your thumb and you're slowly trying to bring that thumb out to the side and bringing it back. And it just takes some time because, like I said, you don't want to force this stretch. You want to gently and slowly let your muscles adjust and lengthen as you're stretching. So after you work on stretching out your thumb, then you would come and try to stretch out your fingers. So if you can get underneath your fingertips and try to pull them out and try to get them open. Now, they may not get completely straight, and that's okay. We're just trying to get them away from the palm and get that hand opened up. So stretching can be a really vital part of your daily routine to combat a clenched or tight fist. And the last step in our progression is exercise. And this is a really important piece because if you have some movement, the goal is that we get you moving, we get that hand exercising more as a way to combat that clenched fist. We are doing that by trying to retrain the brain via neuroplasticity. And if you want to learn more about that, you can check out my video on neuroplasticity to get a better idea. But the goal is that we are doing movements that counteract and move opposite to what goes into a clenched fist. So what we might do is turn your hand so that it's pinky side down and try to get you actively moving your wrist back, because we know we tend to bend wrist with a clenched fist, so we want to try to bring wrist back. And this is one of the hardest movements or the slowest movements to get back after a stroke. So even if you don't have any active movement, I would still encourage you to try it. Now, the other movements we want to try to do is actively bringing the thumb out to the side and back, and bringing the thumb up and out and back. And then the last movement that's really important to focus on is, of course, trying to bring fingers back. And if you can't get your fingers all the way straightened out, again, it's okay. It's just the fact that you're trying to use that movement and trying to rebuild those pathways that is the important part. All right, everyone, that's it for today. As always, I'm leaving a link down in the description below to sign up for my email list, which gets you free stroke recovery information, tips, and motivation, as well as a free copy of my ebook, The Stroke Recovery Pocket Guide. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.